Hello everyone, my name is Reginitza Gastelum and I'm doing this video because I actually don't know how to put audio into a presentation, so I choose to do it this way. Okay, so in this presentation we will talk a little bit about romanticism um, and getting to know it through its authors. First of all, I want to talk a little bit about the misconception that romanticism is only these beautiful landscapes and art and romance and love. Even though there's a lot of paintings that fit that description, there's a lot that doesn't fit into it. So, first of all, what is Romanticism? Well, Romanticism was an artistic and intellectual movement in the late 1700s to 1800s. The main characteristic of this it was to express feelings, and although of course it can be cute feelings like love, it also can be related to, as we know, sadness or passion, right? It also like work a lot with imagination and individual experience. We will see a lot of nature, rebellion, and emotion, and individual. At this time, was happening is that it was just the end of the. We just started to get into the illustration, the lightning, where all the people was tired of war and just like showing strong men that only the only reason they were winners is because of their strength and or their power. People started to thinking further that started to think more about emotions and feelings and reasoning, right? This takes us to our first writer, Caspar David Friedrich. He was German. He was born in 1774 and he died in 1840. He was actually one of the, when we think of romanticism, we think about his paintings. He drew spiritual and symbolic, and the key theme was man versus the sublime. We can see, and his works ask to the people that is looking at it, what does it mean to be small in an infinite world? We can also see a lot of landscapes and a lot of nature. For that takes us to his artwork. This is actually one of the most famous ones. I'm really sure that everyone is familiar to this one. Is Wanderer Above the Sea of Rock. This scene is a man that stands on a rocky peak, backturned, gazing into a vast sea of rock. Mountain arise like an island below him. This is sublime, as I said before. It is like a man standing and looking like something that is bigger than itself. The wonder is us. In this representation, the wonder is us. Every human confronting the unknown, the unsearched, is basically like you are standing there in the sea of fog and you're just standing there waiting to see what happens. That's basically a representation. For our next author here, I want to talk about Francisco de Goya. He was a Spanish. He was born in 1746 and he died in 1828. He was kind of a painter that we see as more dark. In contrast with our last painter, he was more into rebellion and dark symbolisms. His paintings were really symbolized. His early, and there's also a really huge difference between his early work and his dark period. His early work, he drew, portraits and vibrant scenes, but in his dark period, he started to paint neatness and social critique and war. He was really politic. First, this is one of his most important paintings, and we can also here see there's a huge difference between the last painting and this one, right? And this is called The Witch's Sabbath or El Aquelarre. What you see is basically a lot of wizards and witches and demons gathering around with a devil or the horned goat. What it represents is fear, superstition, and scathing critique of Spanish society. This was also a critique. The thing that is really, really important to understand is that every painting here represents something, right? Especially the paintings of De La Goya were dark and also a critique for story. Well, the reason here is why it matters, why we care about it. One of the black paintings, it reveals Goya terror of human irrationality, as relevant today is 1823. Also, we can use this as a representation of what is happening today and what happened yesterday because this is a representation of society. Because it shows arrogance in the church and the mob mentality of, I'm always right, you're always wrong, and I'm getting what I want no matter what I have to do to get it, right? Our next painter is Eugène Delacroix. He was French, as we can tell. He was born in 1798. He was one of the most important romanticism painters. He used a lot of colors and subjects, and his paintings were really focused in. He wanted that the second you look at it, his paintings, something will move in your soul. And his style is more dynamic, more colorful, and his inspiration, as in a lot of painters, was the Revolution, Byron, and Shakespeare. Let's see his job. Liberatory leading the people. As I said, he constantly drew and painted revolution, but and social critique, but without going this dark as De La Goya did, right? This is a figure of liberty. She's showing a tricolor flag that is right now we know that is a French flag. She leads citizens and barricades and is like the goddess of revolution. There's a lot of people united here. There's students, soldiers, and everyone that was like supporting the revolution. And he paint and the symbolism here is that we can see there's a lot of light in the upper half. Let me check it. There's a lot of light in this upper half and a lot of dark in this part. This part is it's hope, it's radiant, it's unstoppable. It's beautiful. It's like what everyone was expecting. But this half is death, is sadness, is dark colors. So what he wanted to do here is to represent like the dream of what people thought would happen and what was actually happening on the revolution. Let's move on to Theodore Gary Géricault. He was French, and even though he died really young, he had a huge impact into painting. He was obsessed with human body and anatomy, and he used to paint under a lot of stress, and he died corpses and bodies and naked bodies. And his objective was to show this uncomfortable truth that we tend to try to ignore. And a lot of his masterpieces were really scandalous of the time because he drew and he painted all these things without any fear. And this changed it out forever. He was known for psychological intensity and legacy. There were a lot of like blood and a lot of like this sad and representation are really crude representations. Let's see. Here, what we see is a raft to the Medusa. Personally, for me, this is one of the ones I really like. As we can see, Medusa was a representation of a Greek goddess in that time, but this was because of the ship that wrecked where 147 people died and was abandoned. And only 15 survived after starvation, madness, and cannibalism. What he wanted to show here is what was actually happening. It was kind of like a new that everyone was trying to forget, but he decided to do this painting to represent what was really happening. There's a lot of corpses and crying and dead and sea, and we can also see that this is endless. We can It's really hard to also count how many bodies we can see here, and that also we can see that there is some hope. Even though that everyone's dying, there's some hope of finding something else that will save them. That was actually a representation of how people in France was feeling at that time with the revolution. So, as a final reflection, I would like you to think a little bit about what we saw so far. We saw some beautiful paintings, like a man standing into a huge sea, or a group of people working for revolution and hope. And but we also, on the other half, we can see there a lot of death, a lot of suffering. So this breaks with the stereotype that romanticism is also pretty and nice and love. No, the main thing is that it represents emotions. It can be any type of emotions. What I also like you to think about is that every painting here is highly represented by the political times in that time. Previously, art was only represented to people that could afford it. Art was just pretty. But now, in romanticism, when we stopped thinking about it and people started to believe in what they could do, started to believe into reflection and personal thinking, we could start to see this type of paintings where of course, they are absolutely beautiful, but there's also a lot of things going on there. And the one that fun fact is the ones that are more like happy and cute and all were with let's say with the crown, and the ones that are, let's say, more sad or involves more dead or against the revolution. So it's really interesting to know that. I think that will be all for my participation. I hope you enjoyed it, and that will be all. Thank you so much.